Hi, my name's Adam Sandman, and thanks for joining today's webinar on accelerating software testing, validation, and compliance of your software and medical trials from Inflectra. And during today's webinar, we will be taking questions. So if you have a question during the presentation, please feel free to write it in the question window, and I will read them out at the end. Also, as I'm sure people are aware, there's lots of people using streaming services right now because of the current situation. So we have observed using tools like GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar that there can be lags and delays. So we will be putting a recording of the entire presentation onto our YouTube channel and making it available to all attendees who came and those who couldn't make it. So don't worry if for any reason you have your audio slightly cuts out, or if anything pauses for a short second, there will be a full recording being made available after the fact, so it's okay. I will try and speak slowly and give time in case there is any audio issues or buffering. So in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about a few different things. The first thing we'll be talking about is the urgency around validation and testing. And we say software validation, but really it's actually more than that. It's also hardware systems, medical devices, therapies, pharma, anything that has to do with life sciences and validation and testing. The urgency, I think, is apparent, but there's some specific things that are happening, which makes validation very important. We've then got to talk about some general best practices around how to do this based on what we've seen the market moving. We'll then change tacks a little bit and look at the Inflectra platform of tools, just for those who are new to our system to know what are the tools we're offering, how do they all fit together. We won't spend much time on that. And then we'll jump into the meat of this, which is really how can SpiraPlan, one of our tools on our main flagship platform, how can it help you with validation, testing, and compliance? And there are some specific features we have to enable that. I'm going to show you some of those features. We're also going to show you how you can configure SpiraPlan to actually do that as well. Now, we're not going to have time to probably configure the entire system. That's a several-day engagement where you would go in and set the system up, but we're going to give you a taste of how you can do it and how easy it is. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So presentation and live application should be about 45 minutes, should have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. Okay, so the first thing is, the urgency around software validation and testing. So what is the urgency? The first thing is compliance is critical, and you may be working in different fields, and we have clients of ours who work in hospitals. They have to test systems that are being installed. It could be information systems, everything as innocuous as Microsoft Outlook, to a MRI scanning tool. It could be someone developing a medical device. It could be people doing clinical trials and managing the actual paperwork of the clinical trial itself. It could be pharmaceutical companies. It could be someone building a software system that is embedded into a hardware system, or it could be systems that are being developed for use in a hospital setting. So there's lots of different angles that all tie together into this general problem. And the main challenge we have is that there's a very strong set of regulations and rules that are in place for how you build these systems and how you test and validate these systems, both when you build them, but when you install them, when you use them, and when you update them. And that's part of the problem too. And those regulations are changing. Right now, we're in a rapid deregulation because of the coronavirus. People are trying to get things into market faster. But on the other hand, you have to make sure you're not doing any harm by that. So you need to be able to do testing and validation continuously and be able to do it faster and being able to do it more nimbly. But you still need to be able to have traceability and compliance, because you have to be able to prove that what you did still works. So it's fine to try different things. It's fine to be flexible and see if something can be used in a unique way. But you have to make sure you're still tracking the information, being able to make sure you understand the baseline that you're comparing it against, so that when you develop something new and release it, you've got the proof that it's not going to do any harm and it's going to provide efficiency over the current state. And some of those challenges would be, there is literally the compliance with CFR Part 11 and all of the electronic signatures, that the validation of those systems that you have to do. And not only do you have to test the system that you're building, but you have to test all the systems you're using to build that device, pharmaceutical product, IT system, you have to be able to test the testing system. So when you use a tool like SpiraPlan, which is our tool, or if you were to do it using manual methods, whatever the process is, every tool has to be tested and validated that it works as expected. So if you're using Microsoft Excel to do your test case management, well, you have to test that Excel is accurate, that the numbers are going to add up. Right? So whatever you're using to do all that testing and management has to be tested itself. And then the other thing is what we're going to call agile compliance. In software development, you have agile methodologies, you have Scrum, you have Kanban. You can have a minimum viable product that you can throw out into the marketplace, and as Facebook said, you can break things and rapidly, and if they don't work, just drop them. Well, obviously in the life science field, you can't do that because people will die if you do things like that. But on the other hand, the rules are being delayed, and there are flexibilities today that there weren't maybe even a month ago, because people want to try existing technologies that may not have been designed for something, but it may actually work. So we need to define new requirements for something that may already exist. We may have something that already exists, and we're extending the requirements. But even though we might be able to try things out faster than before, the rules are not being removed. They're being delayed. The FDA says you've got expedited approval. Well, you've got 15 days. You can try this stuff. Or maybe it's 30 days, whatever the eventual number of days is that you're giving a waiver from. Eventually, you have to be able to prove that what you did actually did work and was safe and efficient and effective. So you have to be agile now, but compliant later. And so in this sort of diagram, it's like we want to be able to get things to market faster, but we also have to be ready for the compliance and the regulations and the rules that exist. So if you're a software system, you can just think of the top arrow, but here in life sciences, you have to think about blending agile with traceability and understanding everything. So what are some of the best practices we've found talking to our clients and prospects who are in this space? Well, the first thing is, it is best, if possible, to avoid manual paper methods. And paper methods doesn't just mean literally on paper. It could be a SharePoint full of Excel sheets. It could be a Google Drive full of Word documents, or Google Sheets, or Google Docs, in fact. What we find is if you have to manage information, if you have requirements, you have tests, you've got test results, you've got defects that you found, you've got risks that you're managing, you can manage all of those things in 100 different Google Sheets or Excel spreadsheets. That's fine. You can do that very easily. The problem is it's very difficult to put that information together to find that you haven't missed something. And also, as you release a new version or an update, or if you try changing something, you have to make sure you've covered everything, you haven't missed a certain piece. Also, because those tools are very good at collecting information, but not very good at analyzing information, you may miss patterns. You may miss that there's a single issue that's affecting a whole bunch of different requirements, and you might lose that in the massive data that you have. So it's difficult to find information. You may just have a lot of data if you use those methods. And then all the other problem with those is if you have to then be audited by someone after the fact, what may have worked when you were rapidly building something is very hard to then prove to someone, oh, well, here, let me go through my 100 sheets. Let's find everything, show you how it all ties together. It can be quite difficult. And then, so the key piece we find is it is best if from the day one, think about what is the integrated process you need across your different disciplines. And that's things like the requirements management. And sometimes your requirements team is the same as your testing team. You're developing the test, developing the requirements. The quality is the same group of people, maybe different hats. Sometimes it's a different team. You've got a business analysis group who is separate from the testing and quality group, and that's okay. But you have to have a process that ties them together. You also have to be able to understand the development of something. So the team that does the product development, that's got to tie back to requirements. And any change management that's being done has to flow back into the product being developed, also to the requirements to make sure they're still accurate. It's too often that you have requirements that were accurate before you started development, and then as you start development and changes happen, the requirements quickly get out of date, and then no one's sure of what is the source of truth. Is the source of truth your requirement? Is it the requirement plus all the comments? Is it the requirement plus all the comments plus all the development tasks? Is it the requirements, the comments, the development tasks, and all the associated changes that are linked? And if you have a sophisticated system that ties it all together, that's okay. If you don't, maybe you should update the requirements in real time. Maybe you should do that anyway, have a review cycle. So there's no right or wrong answer necessarily, but it's understanding what is the process, what is the source of truth, and whether that's a single artifact or a combination of artifacts linked together, that can be a single source of truth in their entirety. It's really important. And then two areas that are often forgotten or an afterthought would be risk management and documentation management or document management. Many times people will have a separate tool for document management that's separate from all their requirements and maybe their tests and their defects. And so how is that being managed? How are those being linked together? Is it a series of SharePoint links or wiki pages, or is it something more integrated and sophisticated? And then when it comes to risk management, first of all, do you have risk management? And if you do, is it a risk management based on software risk management? Is it a hardware risk management? Is it following FMEA? Is it following the ISO standard? What types of risk management do you have, depending on either what you're building, or potentially what part of what you're building? Maybe your software team and your hardware team are doing different risk management methodologies. How are you tracking then the program risks? So you have to understand the risk management, how it ties into that integrated process. So those are some of the general best practices. Just to recap, avoid manual methods, have an integrated process, and a single source of truth. And a single source doesn't simply mean one document. It's just a single place to go to. And it could be a single source for requirements, a separate single source for test cases. That's okay as long as you have traceability. Maybe a separate single source for risks. What you don't want is to have requirements being defined in 6 places that you have to put together to define what that requirement truly is. The second best practice would be, where possible, if you have a system, if you're not just relying on documents and manual methods, the source of truth should be that system. So if you are going to track requirements in a tool, maybe it's our tool, maybe it's a different tool, it's fine. Whatever tool or tools you're using, define the source of truth, and then make sure that when you generate documentation, it comes from the system. And if people look at the documentation and have feedback and comments, you don't just simply update the documentation, but then leave the source of truth out of date, because then it's no longer the source of truth. Make sure that people realize if you've got a document you generate as a report, that's an output. It's a work output from the system, and that if you don't like what's in that report for whatever reason, which is fine, you go back and you update the system and then regenerate the report. But it's really easy for people to start working around that. You get a report emailed to you, you make some comments, you email it to someone else, it goes into a group chat, and very quickly you lose that source of truth. So it's good to have a source of truth, but it's important to make sure that as you generate reports and documentation, you know that that's not the source of truth. And the other thing we find that people find difficult sometimes is to give up the concept of a requirements document. This is particularly with requirements. Test cases a little bit less so, but a requirements document is sort of this physical thing. And what we find is, especially if you're going to a more agile approach, you're going to want to think of requirements as a set of items, a set of features, a set of use cases, a set of specifications, a set of rules, potentially a set of laws even. All of those different things that are requirements need to be in the system, and they will be discrete things that get tied together as data. It's not just one giant requirements document that lives in its entirety. And so even though you might be able to show it as a document when it needs to be shown that way, people need to think of it more as individual items that tie together to the whole. And the other best practice we would say is make sure that you configure your system to match your process. So don't have a process and then have a system configured differently. And that sounds obvious, like, well, why would I do that? But it's surprising how many times people, they don't understand, they haven't been trained, so they don't configure whatever system is they're using properly, and then the system doesn't match their process. So then people have to fight the system every day to make it kind of work for the process. So they have to, do multiple manual steps. They've got to shuttle it between different systems. They've got to put in lots of custom fields or custom tokens or whatever it is they have to do. Make sure your process and your system are aligned as much as possible. Ideally, it should be completely aligned. So, make sure the workflow in the tool supports the workflow. And also, if, for example, your system cannot support that process, maybe you need to look at the process and see if you need to change the process and then get it recertified and revalidated. But whatever you have, make sure the two work together, hand in glove. So that's some general things we'd like to mention about the urgency, what's driving things right now, and some of the things you should be doing. That's all general good advice, nothing to do with any of our products. These slides are going to be published online. Feel free to use those. Now, in terms of what we as a company, Inflectra, offer, we're going to now talk more about our platform and how we offer some features and functionality to support that. The first thing is the Inflectra Suite. For those who are new to us, we offer an entire line of products focusing on software development, testing, lifecycle, requirements management, basically everything from idea generation, creating an idea, taking an idea, reviewing it, building it, testing it. Quality first is one of our mantras. Understanding the risks associated with it, releasing it, supporting it, and then obviously goes back in. Feedback from users becomes new features. So it's an end-to-end life cycle. And so today's focus will be on the SpiraPlan product. That's our portfolio and program management. It contains our lifecycle management, requirements test management, defect tracking, and code management. So SpiraPlan is basically the whole lifecycle management platform. SpiraTeam and SpiraTest are subsets. I will be demonstrating and talking about SpiraPlan today, but depending on your needs, you might decide that I don't need the risk management module. We don't do that, or we're not going to do it in the tool. We're going to do it somewhere else. So then you might decide that SpiraTeam would be sufficient. Maybe we're only building one product. We don't need a portfolio management tool because we're not managing 10 products. Maybe SpiraTeam is sufficient then. The other thing is if maybe we're from primarily testing, we're a hospital, we're not building systems, we're taking systems that someone else has developed, we're doing independent testing as they get installed. Maybe SpiraTest is efficient and appropriate for you. So there are different tools that basically elevate as you go from test to team to plan. The richness of functionality, the sophistication increases, the number of different disciplines you can use, and the scale is different. So for example, we have hospitals that use SpiraTest, and they use it for primarily testing systems that are being installed in the hospital. We have people building devices. They use SpiraTeam because they're focused on building a single product. And then we have SpiraPlan. People who are managing many different products, many different aspects of them, need the rich functionality like risk management, which is only in Plan, and they want to manage all of that in one tool. So you can start with one, move up to the other. And then if you are doing any kind of automation, Rapise is our test automation tool. It does a combination of test automation and process automation. So you can use it to both rapidly test your system. So if you were, for example, at a hospital, you want to test all your systems, you don't want to do it manually, you can use Rapise to do that. Maybe you're testing commercial applications. We have customers who have to test everything and validate everything. So for example, I mentioned before, you might be validating Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Excel. Rapise can do that for you. It also can be used to validate SpiraTeam itself, but it can test and validate any of your applications automatically. So that way you don't have to spend time manually testing things, especially as things become more cloud-based. You're finding that things are updating every month. Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics and Office 365, they update every month. So if you're supposed to be validating those, you may need to run a regression test of your own to validate it every month. Rapise can do that for you. And then ChronoDesk is our support tool, and SpiraCapture is our exploratory testing capture tool. And that just helps capture evidence when you're doing testing, being able to capture real-time evidence as you're doing testing without the person having to actually click a screenshot. It's a useful add-on for SpiraTest and SpiraTeam and SpiraPlan. So that's our entire suite. Our focus today is going to be on SpiraPlan and Test and Team, that whole middle block. If you are interested in Rapise or the other tools, we do have other webinars coming up in the near future on those as well. And just to emphasize the different functionality, SpiraPlan is really for an enterprise. SpiraTeam is for a product, a single product or a group of products. And then SpiraTest is for a team, or also if you're just focusing on the testing side of things. You're not building anything, you're just testing. And there is a comparison matrix on our website. If you get this slide from our SlideShare when we post it, you click on the link and it goes to our comparison website. So that's SpiraPlan. So let's talk about some of the features that make SpiraPlan particularly good for compliance and validation. So the first thing is it has end-to-end traceability out of the box. You're going to see that. We're going to go from requirements to tests, tasks, defects, code. You see all of that. Data privacy and security are baked in. We support HIPAA. We do BAA agreements with clients. We have a cloud platform that's secure based on Amazon Web Services, and we also have independent audits from Life Science Audit Company. We also have very strong data security measures built in. We're going to talk more about this as we get into the slides. The other thing is we've got a great document generation and reporting system built in, so you can generate your documentation from the system. That way, SpiraPlan is your source of truth, and you generate documentation from that. We have workflows and electronic signatures built in. No add-ons needed. And we also have integration across the software value chain. What that means is not only do you have SpiraPlan, we have integration with a lot of other tools already out of the box. So if you are doing any automated testing already and it's using other tools, don't worry, we have plugins for all of those. If your developers are doing software development, they can use IDE plugins to be able to literally commit every line of code to a specific feature. So if you ever audited, you can say, oh, why did you change this line of code? there's the change request, there's a requirement, there's a test case. We've got that integration across the entire value chain. Specifically for life sciences, we have 4 key features, I think, which are unique. One is we have the built-in electronic signatures. We have the hosting, where we do support HIPAA BAA agreements. We have the end-to-end traceability from requirements to test to code and actually risks. And then we also have the validated platform where you can control the update cadence. So this is I think a feature that's often not thought about until you start to think about deploying software. We do offer SpiraPlan both cloud hosted and on-premise. So for clients that really want the data on site, you can install it on site, run it in your data center, and it's completely good, no problems at all. And it's the same functionality, web-based, just as easy to use as the cloud version. The same UI exactly. So your users can learn one or the other. It's no difference. But the other thing is, if you are going cloud-based, the biggest challenge with cloud is going to be if you do validation. Well, you've got to validate every time you update it. And if you update it every month, like some other vendors do, like Microsoft, that's a pain in the neck because you've got to validate it every month, which is a lot of work. So we do have the option where you can opt into our basically opt-in model. For most of our clients who are not in life sciences, they have the auto updates where every month they go from 6.1 to 6.2 to 6.3 to 6.4. What we do for those customers that are life science based is they can opt into our product where you have effectively a production instance that's locked on a version. You have a much smaller dev instance that you can look at that's updated every month, and then you just tell us once a year, whatever 6 months, whatever makes sense for you. Can you update us now to the next version? We want this functionality. You then get to opt in when you need. So it reduces your validation overhead. So let's go into some of the other features that make SpiraPlan unique and really powerful. I'm going to be showing you most of these in the live application, but just to give you a little bit of a flavor, the first thing is requirements management, and we have different views of requirements management. We have on the top left, we have that view where you'll see the requirements in a tree structure with inline graphs where you can quickly see what's your test coverage, what's passed, what's failed, what's not yet been tested. We've also got a mind map view, which is in the middle and the bottom, which lets you see all the relationships graphically in real time, so you can see what's linked to everything else. And in the top right, you've got the ability now in a relatively new view we added called the document view, which gives you a document view of all your requirements. And we found this is really useful for, first of all, the business analyst community. They think of requirements not as a series of like names, like user stories or names of requirements. They really think of requirements as what's in the content. And they want to see it all written out because they want to be able to read it and see how it all flows together. They want to think of it as a section of different features that all tie into a greater whole. And so this new document view we've got built in lets you see your requirements like a document, but it's still discrete requirements. It has the flexibility of being all discrete items, but you can still view it as a document. And from a change management standpoint, people who are moving from the world of manual methods and documents, they get to see a world that's very familiar to them, and it makes them much more comfortable using the tool versus working around it. Before we had this view, people would often try and export things to Word or Google Docs and then make changes and like, okay, we've lost the source of truth. This way, you still have one source of truth, but you have multiple views of that truth. And then when you get into test validation, as I said, you've got that test coverage column that you can see right here. And that lets you see all of your requirements, and you can do filtering and searching and see what's my test coverage. And what's green, what's not, what's been passed, what's red, what's failed, what's gray, which has not been tested yet. Blue means not covered by a test case, and then blocked and caution, you can't test something or a minor issue as well. So you can see in real time what's going on. Everything you see here is real time, because obviously if you are doing testing, it's really important to know immediately how close you are, not maybe after 2 days of manually crunching the data in a spreadsheet. Traceability is managed end to end. You can link one requirement to many test cases to one requirement. You can link across different projects. So if you had, for example, a product that's composed of smaller systems, subsystems, you can have requirements in each of the subsystems all be shared into the parent product and still have independent test cases in the parent. And we'll show you some of that. We also have traceability to other parts of the system. Every requirement can be traced not just to a test case, but to other requirements, to tasks, to documents, to, in this case, you can see to defects, also to other use cases and requirements, and also to source code as well. So you can have traceability pretty much from requirements to everything else. The other thing we've got in SpiraPlan, which is a relatively new feature, is risk management, and this is a relatively new module we added about a year and a half ago. I guess it's relatively recent, and improved several times since. And this gives you a full risk management capability where you can track risks, associate the probability and the impact, track the exposure, link it back to requirements, link it back to tests. You can mitigate these and have that traceability from risks to the other parts of the system. And this was inspired because we have quite a few customers who were using Spira for requirements management and test and quality management, but then they didn't actually have anywhere to store their risks, so they're using a spreadsheet. So we're like, well, this makes sense. This is a good feature that we should have to have it all in one place. We also have document management built in, and we do have workflows and approvals. So if you see here, you can have all the documentation associated with your requirements, everything needs to be approved. It has a workflow engine, and it also has electronic signatures, same as everything else. So you can now manage all of your documentation, link it to your requirements and your tests, and have it all in the same system. Speaking of electronic signatures, that is a key advantage we have. We have a built-in system where every time you want to make a certain change, you can decide as an administrator which changes require signatures, and we'll talk about the configuration of the system to go through when you would do that and how you would do that. But basically, you can have it so that depending on when a user makes a transition, a change of state of an artifact, you can make them log in, sign the change with the meaning of the change, what they're doing, they sign it, and it hashes the data together with their name, login, password, the date they changed it, what was changed, and it hashes that data with the data itself. So that way, if someone tries to change it or it's ever changed, it will break the signature. It will show as invalid. So we can guarantee that what you're seeing is the data that the person saw when they signed it. We also do have a source code management module called Tara Vault built into Spira. So if you have a place ready to manage source code, like you're using GitHub or GitLab, for example, you can actually integrate that as well. But if you didn't want or don't have that kind of tool, we do have built-in source code management on our cloud platform. So that way you've got a single place to store everything, all your artifacts, requirements, test cases, tasks, defects, risks, documents, and source code, all traced together. And we support both Subversion and Git. We support, most software development teams are using Git these days. We do support Subversion. There are some industries that are still using Subversion because they want much more centralized control. They don't want it distributed. Also, they may be storing large binary files, which Subversion is better at. So again, if you need Subversion and Git, Tarabolt's a really good choice. And then, of course, when you do testing and validation, things don't work, they fail. That's the whole point. If there were no defects, we wouldn't have done testing. So by finding defects, we do track them right in the system. We've got a full defect and issue and incident tracker built in, tracks deviations, defects. You can create custom workflows to track all the actions, the corrections, and you tie it back to the test cases so that when the defect is fixed, you know it has to be retested to validate that it was truly fixed and the source code was checked in and so on. We've got different views of the defect tracker. We've got both a sort of traditional grid view, which is sortable and filterable, but also a Kanban board view as well. And of course, if you are using another defect tracker, we do have integration with about 20 different defect trackers, including Jira, Microsoft's Azure DevOps, I guess TFS it used to be called, GitLab, GitHub, and a bunch of others as well. Another really important feature in SpiraPlan is the audit logging and trail. So as you make any change, it's going to show that in the audit trail. If it's a change that had an electronic signature, it will be flagged as a separate type with that signature. And depending on the role, you can see all those changes across the entire project for all artifacts as well. So there's a full audit log. So if you're ever audited by someone, you can go in and actually prove to them, here's what we did, here's what happened, why it was changed, and all the rest of it. All there, in black and white. Obviously, security and privacy are really important when you're talking about medical data, hospital systems. So we do have a very robust security system where you can manage different artifact types and different permissions. You can track who can modify different items. Can they modify all of that type? Can they modify just the ones that are assigned to them? Can they do bulk editing or just editing on the individual item pages? What level of item is it? Is it the test case they can change? Maybe it's just the test step. Maybe they can create a test run, but they can't edit the test case. Whatever you need, you can create as many roles as you like, segment the users into those roles, and then assign the permissions accordingly. Another feature we added literally last month, which is really important, is federated security. We've had Active Directory and LDAP for a long time, which has been great for our on-premise customers because you want to have certainty that only certain people can log into the system, and if they leave the organization, they are out of every system all at once. And so using LDAP lets you have that certainty because you tie in SpiraPlan to your Active Directory, and every user is logging in with their network password. When they're taken off the network or disabled, they're gone right away. But for cloud customers, there's another alternative technology called OAuth, and we've recently released that in SpiraPlan, and it includes support for things like Microsoft ADFS, Google, Okta, and Azure AD. So depending which particular system you're using, we've got pretty much a plugin for all of them. These are the most common 6 we found talking to our clients. And so typically, if you are using, say, Microsoft Active Directory on-premise for your cloud applications, you'll be using ADFS as your federated security. So we do support that. So that way, you've got not only do you have one source of truth for your data, you have one source of truth for your authentication and your user rights management. And then lastly, even though we are talking about regulated industries, you still want to be able to be agile when you can. And so we do have agile views of all the information you're seeing. So as well as the traditional documents view of requirements, the hierarchical view, the test case views, we'll see them. We do have a full agile view. So you can be agile in between where you need to be compliant with regulations. So you can design your requirements, you can build your system in sprints, and then do your validation and independent testing at the end. So you can have a combination or a hybrid of an agile development approach, but still with discrete testing and quality milestones as well. So we do give you these multiple views of the same data in the system. And so the next question will be, I like SpiraPlan, and we're going to show you a live application. But before I do that, just some things to make you think about how could you get on board with the tool. If you're using SpiraPlan today, obviously you can probably forget this part, but we do have some resources to help you get on board with the product, specifically for life sciences. So first of all, we have some validation resources. So if you are using SpiraPlan, and if you already are using it, you probably already have this, we can supply a standard validation package. This is basically the results of our testing. We can supply you with a test report, a test certificate that says, we've tested it against these requirements. Here's our test runs. Here's our test results. Here's our certificate that we did it. And this is the certificate and results for version 6.4. When we release version 6.5, we do the same thing. So we already give you that. And that's something we give you free of charge with the product. Obviously, once it's in place, you have to configure it and customize it to your process, and we'll show you that in a minute. And that's great. But once you've done that, you have to then validate it again. And obviously, we don't do that part because it's in your environment and it's your process. So we've got resources and guides to help you, first of all, how to set it up. So this configuration guide, that explains our best practices for how you configure the tool, specifically for validated industries and particularly life sciences. The second thing is we've got these 2 other checklists which talk about the steps you should do to set it up to support HIPAA, data security and security rules. And then obviously, part 11, electronic signatures and workflows. That one and the configuration guide really go together in setting that part up. And then once that's in place and you do your own validation in place with the processes set up, then we support the ability to lock the version, as I mentioned. So that way, you've got 6.4, you've got our validation package, you've configured it, you've got the workflows, you've got your training manuals, everyone knows how to use it. It's in line with your process. It matches what you've said you're going to do in your own configuration management guide. Now you can lock the platform and then begin using it, knowing that we're not going to suddenly upgrade you to 6.5 or 6.6. So you have to do it all over again. So it gives you certainty that you can quickly get up and running and have certainty that you're going to be able to continue to use that version without having to do a lot more work. And lastly, if you need someone to help you do validation, obviously we give you the resources to do it yourself, but we have 3 partners that we can provide access to who can do this for you in depending on the kind of environment, and there's some differences between them on how they approach things and the scales and the types of clients. But if you have interest on having someone do an independent validation once you've set up SpiraPlan, we can certainly provide them a reference to them and they will do it for you. And in fact, USTM Life Sciences, they actually validate independently SpiraPlan for us. So for example, when we've done a new release every year, we do an audit with them and they audit our stuff and give us recommendations, and we can share their report with you as well. So those are some of the resources we have to actually help you get up and running with SpiraPlan. So that's the end of the PowerPoint. Sorry, it's a lot of material. We're now going to jump more into the live application. So this is a live version of SpiraPlan right over here. And basically, over on the right-hand side, before we jump into the live application, this is our web page for life sciences. So some of the resources I've talked about are on this page. So if you want to access them, just go to Solutions, go to Industries, go to Healthcare and Biotech. You're going to come right here, and you'll see some initial marketing stuff. You can scroll down, but there are some nice links. And then as you go down, here we go, learn more. That's where you'll see some of the important guides. So the first one was that HIPAA checklist. This goes through what you need to do to be HIPAA compliant, some of the things that we're doing. So that way you can read through those, make sure that everything we're doing matches what you need. And if there are any questions, you can email us. And then what we'd recommend is looking at a combination of the white paper on Part 11 compliance. And some of this is in the presentation already. I've talked about this today. In fact, you'll notice it looks somewhat familiar. And then the one I think that is really the most useful once you're actually serious about getting up and running is going to be this blog series. And it's actually three articles. It's Part 1, Part 2, let me go here, and Part 3. And this is going to be the basis of what I'm going to show you today. But this is basically where you will go through, and it explains how to set up the system. Now, it's not telling you you have to set up this way. It's just telling you our general recommendation for a validated environment would be setting up the roles this way. These are the kind of roles you should turn on or off. These are the roles you should create. It'll talk about the workflows, what kind of workflows you should have, how you should lock them down to be appropriately, permissioned for a life science. And it will say, for example, remove some of these transitions that we have by default, because for a life science environment, you don't want to have shortcut transitions. You want to keep it fairly linear. It will talk about electronic signatures and which particular transitions you should have this turned on for. And then the fact is, once you've actually got the requirements, in this case, in a certain state, or the test cases, talking about which fields should be read-only, which fields should be disabled, which fields should be read-write, so that when you write a requirement and it's approved, you probably don't want someone changing it, because that defeats the point of approving it. And so it's setting up those particular configurations to do that. And then similarly for the test cases, the last part will be doing the exact same thing for the test cases, which is, well, what's the workflow? What are the steps you have? What steps do we need to add in? Because you may want to add some additional steps. For example, when you run the test case in a software world and it passes, you're done. But in this case, once you run the test and it passes, someone's got to approve the test result after it was tested. And so this talks about how you add that in, talks about where to do that, how to do that, and talks about when you want to turn on the electronic signature. So this is a really good resource, this three-part blog. It literally is a click-by-click guide to how you set the system up. Again, you should take your own process and compare it to what we're suggesting, because obviously every process is a little bit different. And these three resources do come off that main life science page. So that's a little bit of an overview of how you configure the system. So the next thing we'll do is show you a little bit of the live application, and then I'm going to show you how you customize some of the workflows, and then we're going to move into the Q&A. So first of all, for those who've never seen the tool before, this is SpiraPlan, and SpiraPlan is organized into programs and products. So we'll be working in this library information system product at the beginning, and we'll then create a new one as well when we show you how to configure one. And you can then group these into different programs. Now, a product like library information system, it could be a single system with all its requirements inside of it. You could also have a set of different systems, all different names, which are components that provide requirements and functionality to a larger system, a system of systems, and that's fine too. And you can share requirements between the products if that's the way you set things up. So there's no right or wrong way to set things up. Some people will have literally every product is a single separate product. Other people will have all their separate components be separate products, and then have a master product that is the collection of those. If we go into a specific product, let's go into here. The first thing is the requirements view. And as I mentioned, requirements in SpiraPlan have many different views. You will write your requirements typically in the system. We do have import tools, so you can import from a spreadsheet like Excel or Google Sheets or MS Word directly into the system. And that way you can quickly load the data in. So if you are moving from a manual method, you will probably want to do that rather than typing everything up. So what you'll do is go to our website, go to support, go to add-ons and downloads, and you will see in the add-ons and downloads section, you will see right here all the different import options that we have. So Excel, Word, MS Project, Google Sheets, Excel 365, and there's also some different tools. If you are using an older tool, For example, let's say you're using the free tool TestLink, and it's got your test cases, and you want your test cases and your requirements to now be in the same tool. We can migrate your test cases from TestLink, and then you could migrate your requirements from MS Word and then link them together, for example. So there's things like that you can do. Once the requirements are in the system, let me close off some of these tabs. The requirements will live in the system. If we look at an individual requirement like this one, I'm going to control click over here. Each requirement is going to have the name and description. So this is the name of the requirement. We give it a unique number, so that way we can have traceability. And anywhere else in the system where you want to be able to link to this, you can use this special token, that RQ4. If you click on it, it goes into the clipboard. So developers commit code, they'll often commit code and put that token in. And that's how you know that that line of code is going to be tagged with that requirement. You can then track the test cases. So this one requirement, the ability to add book to the system, it's tested by these 3 test cases, and all 3 have to pass for it to be tested and validated. And those could be test cases from a different product or the same product, depending if it's a shared requirement or not. And also, these could be manual test cases or automated test cases. If you are building a system that can be tested automatically, then these could also be in here too. For a software system, we've got lots and lots of plugins pre-built for that. If it's a hardware system, we've had clients integrated with things like USB devices and Python scripts and all kinds of low-level telecommunication software. So it is possible to even test hardware systems automatically, but there's some of that requires some expertise on the hardware side and the USB and devices and device drivers and things. But it can be done and has been done. And then once you've got your requirement, you also want to develop the product. So in Spira Team and Plan, we also have a full task management, so you can track the development activities, who's building this feature, who's going to set the infrastructure for it. All of that can be described here. Hit new task, and then the attachments. The attachments will link this particular requirement to all the documentation that goes with it. And if you have documentation, you can see that in the separate document management system, which is over here in Documents. So if I then go to a document and say, okay, right-click, I want to view the item in a new tab. Let's do that over here. You'll see that's the document that I linked to. It's a functional spec doc, MS Word doc, and we've got actually 2 different versions of it. And you can actually have a workflow of those versions, and you can complete the document, you can review it, and that way when it's completed, that will lock it to be only that version. So if I mark complete, you'll notice the version add version is gone. So you can actually lock the final version of all the documents, so that way people aren't linking to the wrong version. You're not worried about, is this the version 1 doc or the version 2 doc that we're using? The source of truth is guaranteed. It's all locked down in the system. And if you wanted to make a review, you can go back in the workflow, review the document, and upload a new version. So that way you can control which versions are visible, which versions can be uploaded. And then the requirement will then have the audit trail that I showed you in the slide. This is my live audit trail. Every time you make a change, you'll see it. You can see right now here, we've changed the description, we've changed some other fields. We track all of that. And if it was a change that had an electronic signature, I don't know if we did in this case, you'll see us here, it would say signed. So right now we haven't done anything with electronic signatures. We'll do that in a minute. And so when we do that, you're going to see a different color and it'll say signed. But let's come back to that. So that's our requirements history. Then we have the traceability. This is showing you the links from this requirement to the other requirements in the tree structure, the defects. If there are risks, the risks will be in here too. And also any source code revisions, they're going to appear here. And if we click around a bit, you'll probably see some, we'll hopefully have one with, yeah, here we go. This one's got some source code revisions here. And you can see how the developer was able to put the tokens into the text, which then gives you that link back to that requirement, or in this case, also a task. So you could do that link automatically as you commit code. Now, as I mentioned, requirements have different flavors. So let's look at some different views that we offer. So this is our classic requirements tree structure. This is great for the QA people. The QA people are like, here's my requirements, here's my test cases. Is it tested? Let's have a look. Less than passed. And they would say, oh, I'm a quality person. No, it's not been fully tested because I see things other than green. It's not fully tested because there's things that haven't been run. There's also things that have been tested but have failed. Okay, I know where I stand. Now that's the QA view. But if I'm a business analyst, I want to be able to see all these requirements and understand them and read them. That's why we have the document view. So the exact same requirements are available in the document view. And you can see all of the requirements written out like it was a document. It is just Pig Latin. It's lorem ipsum, not real text. But in real life, it will be real text, obviously. And if you scroll down, we do support use cases, or I click on one. And so we do have the ability to draw diagrams. And what it's doing is taking the use case steps you've written in SpiraPlan, and it draws the diagram. It's not a drawing you had to draw yourself. The system is doing the drawing for you from the actual requirement. And then the other thing we've also added is a mind map view. And this is good because it lets you see all the traceability graphically. So for example, I can scroll down here and see all my requirements. You can see the tree structure. If I scroll to the right, you can even see links, and you can even have associations. So this requirement here has an association to this other requirement. This one has an association to this other requirement. So it's not just the parent-child, it's also the lateral links. And if you do have a lateral link, it's going to include the comment as to what that link represents. In this case, there's a use case that's defining these particular steps. Whatever comment you put in is basically shown here on the diagram. And then if you are able to do any kind of agile development work in your particular initiative, there's also a Kanban and Scrum board view of the exact same requirements as well, with a slight twist in that you can actually see the test cases and validation right here on the board. So if I look at the board and go by release, you'll see not only do I have the requirement right here, this is my requirement story card, there's my 4 development tasks, which are all done. Oh, here are my 3 test cases. Well, this one's blocked, this one's passed. This test case is passed, this one is caution. This one's got some tasks that are late. This has got a test case that's failed. So you can see right here on the board, the quality metrics fully integrated. So that's some of the requirement stuff that we have. Now, the requirements do link to the test cases, and the test cases are right here. So we have a full test management system built in. So you can see all of your test cases. Oh, I've got a filter running, that's what's going on. There we go, it's better. And you can see the test results, and they tie those results back to a requirement. If we go on to a particular test case, like this one here, this test case is supporting a specific requirement. It's that one, the editing of the authors. This test case could be supporting more than one. Every time we run a test case, it's going to have a history. So you can see, what is the history of this test case? Has it consistently passed? Has it failed and then it passed and it failed again? And this is useful if you ever get a defect coming back and people know that, well, we fixed this already. What's going on? You can see the run history and you can see over time what happened. And you can see that maybe you fixed something, but maybe you only fixed one flavor of it and there's still an underlying issue. And so that way, if you're ever audited and someone's like, well, we understand why this issue is reoccurring, you'll be able to go back and say, well, actually, it's the same symptom, but it's actually a different root cause. So we did fix the original root cause. It's a different issue, same symptom, but different reason. And so, we haven't got a regression of bad code getting polluting the system or whatever it is that caused it. So again, full-time traceability and auditability, not just of the changes, but auditability of all the results. And one important thing is, if you ever go to a test result, that test result is the way it was when you ran it. It doesn't matter what I do to the test case today. I can change steps, add steps, do any kind of other things to them. The steps that were in place when I ran the test will be the steps you see here. So it's fully auditable. You're never rewriting history, which is really important. So that's some of the testing functionality. And again, I can only scratch the surface in today's webinar. There's lots of functionality. We literally, a demo of Spira test side would take probably an hour by itself. But we do have some other things that are really important that I want to mention. One is the risk management module. So risk management is a cool feature that we added in, and it's fully integrated into the rest of the system. So you can go in here, you can create new risks, and when you create a risk, you assign it a probability, and you assign an impact. And when you do that, that will change the exposure score. So if I take this risk and I make it, maybe it's a negligible impact, and I can add a comment, maybe it's, actually reassessing the risk, it's negligible, or maybe it's mitigated by one of these mitigations we'll talk about in a minute. Then you go in here, oops, I gotta update the date. That's fine. When I'm gonna review it next, and then it will make the change, and the exposure will change. Great. Go to history. You've got a history of the changes made. Now, what you also can do is you can see which release, which component that belongs to, but you can also see down here, these are the mitigations. So these are the 3 mitigations we have to mitigate this risk. We have review dates for tracking when we're going to look at it next. We can also use the task management module to link actual action items. So that to implement one of those mitigations, we're going to have a task. Maybe it's 2 tasks to implement one mitigation. That's fine. It's not just one-to-one. And then you can use the associations tab to say, well, this particular risk, that risk is actually relates to this particular feature here. So you can add that in as well. And then the benefit for managing all this information in SpiraPlan is if you go to the dashboard, guess what? You've got real-time reporting of all your metrics. You've got this great testing view, which gives you all the quality metrics. Are we be able to prove that we have the quality that we say we are? You can track the development in real time as well. Are we going to be building this next version in time? And then we have a general project management view, which lets you see the whole, of the product from a risk standpoint, from an issue standpoint, from a testing, quality, and progress. So this view is really the project manager's view, which is, how are we looking overall? Are we going to be on time? Is the quality going to be what we expect and what we need? And then what are the risks and impediments we see along the way? So it's a good integrated view. And these three views are just customizable starting points that we have. So that's some of the functionality in the tool. Again, if you want to see a live demo of SpiraPlan, feel free to reach out to our sales team. We can organize a demo for you. And then the last thing to mention is, how do you configure this? Well, we've got this 3-part blog, which talks about how you configure and customize it. So what you would typically do is go into the administration right here. And one of the things you'll do in the blog we'll talk about is, first of all, you go into the system administrator and you want to make sure that the roles and responsibilities are set up correctly. So for your process, you'll go in here and you'll want to customize the permissions and the roles so that all the different roles that you currently have in your process, the person who reviews requirements, the person who reviews test cases, whatever, before running tests, after running tests, all those roles are enumerated, and you're going to build those out and have the right permissions. That's the first thing. The next thing you want to do is then go into the template you're using for that product. And all products use a template. And then you're going to want to look at the workflow. So we have workflows for requirements, we have workflows for test cases. Let's go to the requirements one to start with. And then you can have multiple workflows for different requirement types. So you might have a workflow for a requirement that you're writing versus a requirement that might be a statutory requirement that maybe you can't change, but it has to be documented. Maybe it's a different life cycle. So we go into the steps, and if you go into this particular steps, that's where you can configure the workflow. And that's what the bulk of these 2 articles here talk about, is which transitions do you have and what permissions do you have. So if you go back to the workflow, you can have a transition from requested to accepted, which is I take this requirement and I approve it. Well, if you're doing the validated approach, you need to remove that one. That's the one we ask you to remove. Everything has to go from requested to a formal review process. And from review, and only from review, then it goes to either accepted or rejected. So you cut out that shortcut. And then when you go to accepted, you'll want to turn on the electronic signature. And that's one of the things you'll do. Also, you'll want to limit the roles to the ones that you've defined in your role matrix, so that rather than being any product manager or any manager, you'll have a discrete row that's specific to requirements approval for this kind of requirement. So there's some discrete changes you make here. It's all done through the user interface. Click and point, hit save. And then you repeat that whole process for all the different steps. Do the same thing for the test case steps and the tasks and the documents. And that's the key to the system setup. Once that's done, again, it takes maybe a few hours to do that. You've now got a system that is ready to then be validated in place. And to see how the electronic signature actually works in practice, I'm just going to go through here, and I'm going to go through to one of my requirements that I have, and let's find one that's under review. So let me go to my list view. If I haven't got one that's under review, I'll just create a new one. We got one that's requested. So let's go ahead and move this one through the system. So I'm going to move this. This is a new requirement, and I'm going to move it to under review. I haven't removed that shortcut yet. If I had, you wouldn't have this accept option. You'd already have review. I'll hit save. Notice it lets me do it right away. No changes are needed. Okay, great. And now I want to actually approve it. Now, notice when you go to the accept requirement, you see this padlock. The padlock means it's going to require a signature. So let's go accept. Hit save. If any field is required that wasn't filled out, it's going to warn me. I think everything that you see here is already required and already populated, so it's not going to do that, but let's try it. Okay. And then I enter in here my password again. And the meaning is, what am I signing? And it populates a default meaning, but you as a signer can change this to whatever you want, and that's what's stored with it. Hit sign. It saved the change. Great. So it's now accepted, approved. I've done my job. It will send an email notification to let me know, let people know as well, but we're not going to see that today because it's not turned on for the system. And then if you go to the history, there's my change, fine. Now, if I go to the admin view, you'll notice that this change is different. The one before, the one where I didn't put a signature in, just says not signed. All changes that are not signed just say not signed. But anytime you have a signature associated with the change, you're going to see this, hopefully this green. Green means we have stored the data that was changed and we've put a security hash with it, and the hash matches the changed data. If someone was to go into the database and manually change data, this signature hash would not match anymore, and it will go red and it will say invalid, and you can do a filter to find all of them. Hopefully there should never be any, but you can see it right here. If I click on the change, that's actually the hash right there. So this is the hash token, and that's basically says we store the hash with the data. If the data gets changed, the hash will no longer match, and the data is invalid. It's similar to how blockchains work but a much more simplified way. And so that's how our signature system actually works behind the covers. So that's an overview of SpiraPlan a little bit. Again, I've only been able to scratch the surface. I've talked about the validation challenges and some of the features that we offer, and I've shown you a little bit how you configure the system. And I think we've got about 5 minutes left of our runtime. So with that, I'm now going to hand over to questions. So feel free now to write any questions that you have in the chat window. So if you go to GoToWebinar, there is a question window. It's separate from chat, it just says questions, and you can type your question in there, and then I will read it out to everyone if there are any, and I will answer it, hopefully. So now it's time for questions. Oh, thank you very much, Marcus. I appreciate it. Someone said a great presentation, so I like that question. It's good. Thanks. Any other questions? Feel free to write them. While we're waiting for questions, I'm just going to also mention we have other webinars coming up the next few weeks on RAPIs for test automation. We have a more light-hearted webinar next week on developers and testers in harmony and how you can avoid developers and testers fighting each other when the one says I fixed it and one said no you didn't. Like that never ever happens, of course. So feel free to join that webinar next week. We've also got some other webinars coming up on Agile Project Management, PMOs as well. Okay, so let's say, okay, question came in. How do you suggest linking test sets to requirements? Linking test sets to requirements. Okay, so test cases are linked to requirements. Now, you can create a test set from a requirement, but as of the way the system is designed, the test cases ultimately linked to the requirement. A test set is a group of test cases, and the idea is that a test set is simply an organizational construct for how we're going to run them. So like we have 1,000 test cases, I'm putting them into different test sets because I want to run them, have different people run them, or they're going to run around different machines. It isn't really that you link a test set to a requirement. That's not really how it's meant to work. But there is a shortcut. If you see my screen, you can select requirements and you can say tools. Hold on, let me move the GoToWebinar window. It's right in the way. You can move tools and go, and that one's right in the way, sorry, create test set. So you can create a test set from the requirements, and that will create basically one test case for every requirement, puts them all in a test set and links them back. So it links the test cases to the test set, and all the test cases link back. So it's a bulk creation from the test set, but it doesn't link them to the test set. They're still linked to the test case. Second question, which is a really good question, multiple sign-offs. So that's something we are actually in the process of building. It is not available currently. So if you go to the workflow editor and you go to, let's say, requirements or test cases, I'll do test cases just because we've already seen the other one. And you go to transition, you'll go ready for review and approved. Right now, the way the system works is when it goes from ready to review to approved, it's a single person can do it. If you want to have 2 people sign it, you have to have 2 separate actions, approval 1, approval 2, which is okay, but it's a bit brittle. So we are actually going to be adding functionality in the future, not today, but this year, it's going to basically allow you to have multiple signatures, and when both people sign it, then it will move from ready to review to approved. And the second thing is, we'll also kind of have a centralized review center, so that if I have 10 requirements to approve, I don't have to go through 10 requirements and go click, click, click. There'll be a review center which centralizes it. So that's an area we recognize that we don't have as good of a functionality as we need and not as usable as we need. And so we are going to be working on that. But yeah, good question. Okay, well, while we're wrapping up, just to let you know again, thanks again for attending this webinar. We will be posting the recording of this for people who didn't make it today. So if you want to share it, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And other things, if you have any comments or other ideas of things we could be doing, both products, features, etc., let us know. I will do a short plug also, assuming that this whole thing gets better with the virus. We do have our conference in October, which it looks like good timing now. It wasn't in the spring, so that is something that if you're interested in more about SpiraPlan and Inflectra and what we're doing, feel free to come to that. We're also going to have a whole series of webinars for the rest of the year as well. So keep an eye on what's published. We keep trying to find engaging content. If there's any webinars that you think we haven't done that you'd like to see, do let us know. You can write on our YouTube channel. You can email us. You can email marketing@inflectra.com and give us your ideas. So appreciate it. Thanks so much. Be safe out there, and see you on the next webinar.